Hello, everybody. I'm Ed Parcaut, of your host of Helping the Brave, and today we have Dave Albin. I've known Dave now, it seems like forever, but I think it's like all of 3 months. And we just put on a firewalk together for veterans here in Modesto, California. And let's welcome Dave into the show. How you doing, Dave?
Hey, I love that. Yeah, I do. I feel like I've known you my whole life, bro.
Yeah, what is it, 3 months maybe?
3 months, 4 months. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, it's probably longer than that because we were working on the thing for 6 months. So it has to be
Yeah,
at
true.
least 6 months.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, I was surprised to see and I've talked about it before, the firewalk we did. I gotta say the best thing out of the whole thing was my grandson. I
God,
mean, it was great helping vets, but I mean, just the fact of what he connected with at 7 and then giving you the hug at the end there and what you
I
said to him. So,
I don't even know. I don't even know how to describe that. Nothing's ever happened like that in all my years, 3 decades of doing this, thousands and thousands of people. And yeah, I've walked a lot of kids, but nothing like Eli. It's in fact, I have a hard time talking about it. I get choked up. I mean, it was just so magical. What a beautiful grandson you've got there, and to know that there he was, and because as you remember, he was struggling a little bit with it. He
mhm.
didn't, and then all of a sudden there was this moment, and he just had this like breakthrough, if you will, and boom, across the fire he went. But then to come up to me after when I was saying goodnight and come hug me like that, yeah, it was pretty profound. I got to tell you. Again,
'Cause
I have a hard time talking about it. It was so magical, man.
yeah, he asked his mom if it was okay if went over there and give you a hug.
Oh
Yeah.
gosh. Well, I don't know if you know this, but I sent him a little something. I don't know if he's got it yet, but you'll
I don't
see
know.
it. I sent him a box with some stuff in it, just so he'd have it. So
Our
yeah.
postal service doesn't work amazing. So it's funny because then Modesto to Modesto takes 5 days.
Oh God, that's bad. I live in a really rural area, right? So I got an excuse because I'm out here in the middle of nowhere, but it doesn't take 5 days.
Yeah. All
Wow.
right, so let's kinda get into, your background. What service were you in?
Uh, Army National Guard.
Okay, and why'd you choose the Army?
'Cause I was following in my dad's footsteps. My dad was career military officer, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, worked in the Pentagon, and he made good money, and he was an officer. He was a chief warrant officer, and so he did really well. He was highly respected, and in that moment, I was like, okay, why not? So I went in and came out, and what happened is that as soon as I came out and I was supposed to start my full time gig with the National Guard, Nixon put a freeze on hiring, and so my job went away. And so that was it. I hit a brick wall at that point. But I certainly was going to pursue my dad's career because again he did really well, and I liked the military. I thought it would be a great job, and it would be dad was pretty convincing. It was a good job. You had great benefits. You could move up. There was, you could do well. And then if you decided you wanted to get out, if you had a career doing something as a civilian, you could always do that. So, but dad didn't push me. You know what I mean? He wasn't like, he just said, hey, it might be really good for you. So I went for it. And I was pretty messed up in those days too, Ed. So I thought, this will help me a lot. The discipline, and to get my life turned around because even at that when I went in, I still had a big problem with drugs and alcohol, and
Wow.
as you know, I didn't get that resolved until many years later.
Well, most of the time people don't, especially if they have PTSD. I have a question for you. Where did you
Yeah.
join? I mean, what state? Where were you located?
So I was in Southern Cal.
Oh, really?
I did basic at Fort Jackson, South Carolina.
The reason I'm asking, it seems like I've talked to a lot of people and they're all in the National Guard, but they're all on the East Coast. And I've never heard so much of people going into the National Guard till just recently.
Yeah. So there's a National Guard unit in Long Beach, California, and it's right at the intersection, if you will, of Signal Hill and Long Beach, and that's where my dad was. My dad was an area maintenance officer, right? So he was in the 40th Battalion, and so what Dad did is that when vehicles would break down in Vietnam, he would make sure when they came back to the States, he would direct them where they go and make sure they got maintenance and make sure they got then turned around and went back to wherever they were going. So that was pretty much Dad's job. And so
Oh,
that unit was right there at off Stern Street in Long Beach.
gotcha. And then all right. So when you went through and then got through, you said Nixon stopped all that. Was that mean you had to get out of the service, or that what?
Well, my job went away. I mean, so my full-time position went away, and I didn't have to. But I'm like, what am I doing? I'm going to go in another direction. So they said, hey, if you want out, you can get out. So they gave me an honorable discharge, and out I went.
What'd you do after that? Because I mean, that's got to be you. So most of the time we talk about transitional stories, while
Right,
you're in,
right.
and finding that purpose again, because a lot of people lose that when they get out because they how
Yeah,
it is. We've talked
of
about this
course.
before on
Yeah,
everything we've done, but
yeah. No, it seemed, I was okay with it. They even gave me some money. So they enticed me with money. I don't know why. They just said, hey, if you get out now, you can get out, honorable discharge. And I think they paid me like $1,700, as I
which is a
remember.
fortune back then. What year was
Oh
that?
God, I was like, I'm out. Hit the streets, kid.
What year
Um,
was that?
oh, 74 to my recollection,
So that would
1974.
have, uh, as you know, right now I say we're in the 70s again, and we're about ready to go through that and get into the 80s.
Yeah,
But so that would have been a time to actually be in the service with a job, because we were going through inflation problems. We were going
yeah,
through gas lines, oil, gas shortages, all the other
yeah.
stuff.
We've had that.
Um, and your license plate, even or odd. I only know this
Yeah,
because I was
that's
told
right.
about it. That's how you got gas. And that was just
Right.
a bad time for where we
It
were.
was.
So what did you do during that period? Because I don't think people who are listening to us understand how bad the 70s were with inflation and everything else. And then the 80s, I tell people, if you want to remember the 80s, just go watch the movies The Warriors, which
Yeah.
was about, they showed New
Yeah.
York and how bad it truly was. They didn't make sets. They just used the real subway and the real everything that was there. That's how
Right.
bad it was.
Wow, that's crazy. I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah, because I mean
Um,
that's where what I mean that's how bad we got in the 80s from the 70s and inflation. And I'm not trying to bring that up in your story, but that's where we could be going right now if things don't change.
yeah. Well, we were just a bunch of Southern California surfer boy kids, so we were switching license plates. So we didn't really care, right? It's like, hey, you got an odd? Hey, I got an even. Well, I'll switch out tomorrow. We did that. So we never really, it
That's
wasn't that
funny.
big of a, yeah, right? It was pretty easy to resolve if you ask us. But you're right. Shortly after that too, I got a job in a grocery store, and it was union, and it was the retail clerks union, and our brother union was the Teamsters, so it was a pretty substantial union, and so I entered into an apprentice program, and as a retail clerk, and I went on the night crew. So I never stood at a checker and checked people out. I stocked shelves, and it was a year apprentice. And if I remember right, when I got to the end of the apprenticeship, I was making like $8 and something, 18, 11, $8.11 an hour. Now that would have been in like 1974.
That's a lot of money.
Oh my God, I was rich.
That's like
Literally.
that's not even like that'd be like $50 a day.
Uh,
50.
Something like that. I mean, I went out, I bought a Mach 1 Mustang. I got an apartment down in Belmont Shore, California. Really nice apartment. So I was okay. Um, and then, my best friend, he went in, and he went to, he was stationed at Fort Ord, and he went into firefighting. So he just took a different path. And so he started learning, how to deal with fires on military bases and airports and stuff like this. And then when he came out, he went into the private sector and got a job with the Long Beach Fire Department. Started off there, a rookie walking in the door, and it really worked out well for Carl. He retired a divisional chief in LA County. And so, he did it all, but he contributes all of his career. He learned a ton when he was in the military. In fact, I got a picture of Carl. I don't know where he was when they did this, but they put him in the middle and they poured fuel in a circle around him. And he had one of those, I don't know, it was a silver outfit.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a hose, and then they lit it. And he had to literally fight his way out of that circle of fire. So, I just remember that picture of him. And so, yeah, so again, the military was really, really good to him. He loved it. I did too. I thought it was cool. I wasn't real thrilled with Fort Jackson in the summertime. South Carolina, a lot of bugs. Humidity. Oh God, it was horrible. And we did our share, when we got leave and we went, into Charleston, Columbia, South Carolina, with my buddies. I went out on a delayed entry program too. Mm-hmm. This is worth mentioning. So my dad coached me on that. Right. So he said, look, here, do this, sign up today, and then you'll go in on a delayed entry. And the cool thing about that is you'll be a PFC when you get to basic. So not only will you have the money, but you'll have the rank. And so I went, okay, makes sense to me. So Dad set me up with that. And I don't know that I ever told you this part, Ed. So when I'm in basic, and by the way, when I got there, Dad said, don't volunteer for anything. I don't care what happens. Don't you dare volunteer for anything. Okay, Dad, I got you. Well, I'm standing in formation one morning, and the drill sergeant goes, can any of you maggots type? And I'm thinking Radar O'Reilly, right? I'm right. Like, whoa, I could type, because I took it in my, what was that, my ninth grade. I took it. And
home ec. They called it home ec back then.
It wasn't home. It was literally typing. That's typing, all you. Well, it's part of. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it was part of the home economic system. Right. But the only reason I took it, you probably know why I took typing.
Because all the ladies were in there.
Because all the girls were in typing class. Duh. There was two of us. It was me and a guy by the name of Ed White. So anyway, I'm struggling with. Dad said, don't volunteer. So I said, I can type, drill sergeant. Get out here, Albin. And he said, can you type? And I said, yes, drill sergeant. He goes, where did you learn to type? And I said, junior high school. He said, all right, cool. So go report to the first sergeant, and you're going to be interviewing really with the company commander, with Captain Koch, K-O-C-H. And so I did. I went in, and he set me down, and I typed. And he goes, all right, you got the job. So here's what you need to do. You got to go back to your barracks, move out of where you are, and you're going to move into like this little side. It was part of the barracks, but it was separate. It was my own room. And so I went there, and then anytime Captain Koch went anywhere, I drove the Jeep. So I literally...
You were Radar O'Reilly.
Oh, I was Radar O'Reilly. And all my buddies hated me, right? Because first of all, I've got rank. I'm a PFC. I'm driving the company commander around. And every time they had to run to the range and go out, I don't know if you're familiar with Fort Jackson. But
yeah, my son actually was there. So
okay, so were all the firing ranges and all the qualifying and all that kind of stuff. It's just a big horseshoe. Well, you could literally walk right across the street, down maybe less than a half a mile, and that's where you would be. But they made you go all the way around that horseshoe to come back around to it. So you'd have to, obviously you'd have to hoof it. And so I'm driving it. So, they either loved me or hated me, in my platoon and all that. But yeah, so I got to go through basic training for the most part. Now I had to qualify for PT and all the other stuff, but still I got to ride in a Jeep.
That's like when I went to boot camp. I went and delayed also in the Navy.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. Back in the 85, I went in 85, but I delayed it in 84. And the same thing, but the difference with us is in Navy boot camp, there's two parts. There's the basic people, and then there's the drill. The drill people run the graduation. So halfway through, we're drill company, and they're like, okay, you're going to practice graduation for the next 6 weeks. That's all we did. We didn't do anything.
Oh, wow. Sign me up.
Yeah.
I like it.
I make sure this is how it's going to go. This is okay. We got that down. Yep. So I got lucky again, in that part, but, all right. So how long were you in? A couple years?
No, I was not. I was shy of, let's see, when I got out, found out I didn't have the job. I did my 2 week thing. You do your two weeks at at a bivouac. That was out in the desert, in the Mojave Desert. I did 2 of those. So I guess I was probably in around a year and a half. And that's when they
So you
said,
were
hey,
truly a reserve,
I
meaning
was
that you did
National
the
Guard. Yes.
National Guard Reserve, which did
Yep.
the 1 week in a month,
Yep.
2 weeks a year kind of thing. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was me.
Yeah.
And I had some great times. I mean, again, I loved going out and playing in the desert and, throwing grenades. And as a matter of fact, when we were out there one time, because my last name was Albin, and because so many people knew my father and they loved him because he was really well respected. And so, they'd always, they'd bust my, but still, they had a lot of respect. So I got a lot of special privileges. I have no problem sharing that. And we had to take a ride one time. We were out in the desert and we had to fly to Los Alamitos Air Base, which is back in the day, Los Alamitos, that's where the Navy was. And there was a lot of, munitions and stuff buried in the ground. And we heard nuclear warheads and all kinds of stuff. But I don't know that. But that's what we heard. Anyway, so I got to fly with this guy, with this captain, really cool guy who knew my dad. And so he goes, come on, you're coming with me. And so I jumped in the Huey and went with him. And he flew from where we were again to Los Al and then flew back. And he flew in Vietnam, and talk about a skilled pilot. And if you've ever been in Southern California there, right, if you fly from Los Alamitos out to the desert, out to the Mojave Desert, there's a lot of orange groves. Back in those days, it was just orange grove. That's all you were flying over the top of. And then there's eucalyptus trees at the end where the roads are. Right. So he would come into those eucalyptus trees and he'd flip that bird up, man, and he'd drop it back down onto the orange groves. And I was like, I literally thought I was going to throw up a couple times. He had me, but he was having a lot of fun at my expense. Let's put it that way. Yeah. So I had a great time, and again, it was a great experience. And in the end, Dad goes, yeah, get out. If you're not going to do it full time, that you don't want to be a weekend warrior. So that wasn't why you signed up.
Right.
So yeah, again, but it was a great experience, no doubt about it.
And then after that, what did you do once you got out?
Yeah, well, as I said, I got that job in the retail clerks union.
So how long did you do that? Yeah, I'm sure.
Oh gosh,
you weren't a bagger boy forever.
No, I actually that didn't last very long. I was only a bagger boy for a couple of weeks. They put me on the night crew. And so what I had to do
that's what
there,
I meant, that job, whatever it was.
Yeah. Well, here's what's interesting about that job was it was Lucky Stores. And I don't even know if they're in existence anymore. I think
they were bought by somebody, if I remember right.
Albertsons, I think. So anyway, I was in the biggest grocery store in the state of California. They had 34 check stands across the front. And they were really, really good about, that every night you had a night crew that came in, stocked the whole store, and it had to be perfectly faced. Everything had to be pulled up and every little label had to be pulled out perfectly. That was just the way they did things. So what I did was, because I was coming in, as starting at the bottom, I had a pallet that had this big gate around it, if you will. And it was on a pallet jack, and I would go around the store and throw all the cardboard into that container. Then I would take it out back, offload it into the compactor, and then I'd come back, and that's all I did all night long. So yeah, it was a great job. I mean, for the most part. And the challenge with the job was, and this has to do with my own addictions, because I didn't want to. Because I went in at 10 o'clock in the evening and we worked until 7 o'clock the next morning. And so, unfortunately, I was taking a lot of amphetamines to stay awake. But, again, I was already addicted to drugs. So the idea of taking amphetamines didn't bother me anyway. And then the problem with that is, right, I was taking these amphetamines and then I'd be wired in the morning. And the only way I could come down and actually try to get some sleep was to drink it, so I drank a lot of beer and mostly beer. And then of course, when you're sleeping during the day, I put tinfoil on my windows so there was no sunlight. And what's kind of sucky is back in those days we didn't have air conditioning, right? We didn't have a house that was air conditioning. Your air conditioning was you had to open up your window and put a fan in the window, and so that
You're
was
talking
always
down in Long Beach.
yeah in Long Beach. Yeah,
Yeah,
my
well, I
parents.
still think it's that way for a lot of those places, even down because when I was in Carlsbad and all that, a lot of the places didn't have it. They waited until you open the door, and the wind in the evening comes through and cools everything
Yeah,
off. Yeah,
yeah.
but that's a little bit more comfortable than somewhere in Modesto that still has some places that don't have air conditioning, which I can't believe that because we get that cool breeze, but not till like 10 o'clock at night. So
Yeah.
uh,
Well, Long Beach got as you said, it got the wind from the beach, and so but still, it's still
right,
Long Beach
it
in the
was warm.
summertime. It's
Yeah,
hot. Yeah, it was
yeah,
hot.
yeah.
Yeah,
It gets in
absolutely.
the 90s to 100, and then it cools
Oh
down.
yeah,
But yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
And as long
So
as the winds don't come from the Santa Ana winds, you're okay. So
well, we loved it when it came from the Santa Anas if you're a surfer boy because you know what that does to the waves. So we love
right,
that. However, if a fire starts, well, we know what happens with that too. So
right.
the blowtorch effect from the Santa Anas.
So you keep bringing up your addictions, and I know that your story, but not everybody
Yeah,
else knows your story.
yeah,
And so why don't we just quickly get into that so we can get to the firewalking stuff we were talking about when we
yeah,
first
sure.
started. And I don't mean to rush you, but I'm just saying
No, it's
people need to
cool.
know the story of how you are and where you got to, because people, you have to understand that you're going to go through things in life, and you finally have to get help.
Yeah,
Get the help.
get the
Stop
help.
putting it off.
Well, the addiction started really early. As I was adopted, and my biological father committed suicide 2 months before I was born. And the reason we think he did that is because he hurt his head, and they put a plate in his head in 1954, and he got a lot of pain. So he complained to mom all the time. One day he said he was going to the grocery store, and we never heard from him again. So when I was born to a single mom. She already had two boys. We were living in a one-bedroom apartment in Hollywood. My grandmother was there, another cousin, two half brothers. And so by the time I was 5, she was working up the street at the Roosevelt Hotel, and she couldn't feed us, man. She couldn't put enough food on the table. So she went to her oldest sister, Pat, and said, "Hey, Pat, will you adopt David?" And Pat and Bob Albin said, "Yeah, absolutely." So they moved me from Hollywood to Long Beach. I'm 5 years old. And to move this forward, when I'm 11, the first day of summer, 1964, I'm sitting there, and mom says, "Come in the kitchen, David. Your dad and I need to speak with you." And she set me down, and that's when they told me, "Hey, what we need to tell you, David, is we're not your parents." Okay, well, at 11 years old, that's pretty mind-boggling. And so shortly after that,
Dave, why did they think they had to tell you this
you
at
know
your
what?
age?
I wish I knew the answer to that. I really do. I don't know. I mean, how do you do it? When do you do it?
You
I
do it when
thought
the
about.
kids ask, usually. Because
I
my son, I adopted my wife's kids. Blake was the
Right,
only one who didn't realize he's 2.5. He was 2.5 at the time, and
right.
he had a different last name, and he never brought it up. And people go, "When are you going to tell him?" I said, "When he asks." Right.
Well,
And then we had to bring
how
it
if
up
you
because
don't
I was
know?
adopted. Huh?
Well, see, the thing for me too is what was really confusing was, everybody said, "Oh, you look just like your dad. You're a good-looking young boy. You look just like your dad." So when they told me that, and now I find out my dad's not my dad, that was really confusing. I don't
Mhm.
know why they chose that moment because I would have never known to ask.
Right.
Right? I just think they're my parents. So I don't know. There was a lot going on right then in 1964. Dad was really, really nervous. He was scared to death. He was working in the Pentagon. He knew what was going on with the Cuban Missile Crisis in the Bay of Pigs. Kennedy had just been assassinated in November of '63. So there was all that was going on, and there was a lot of pressure on him. So, and then they told me, "Hey, we're not your parents." And then of course, mom said, "By the way, your Aunt Dean, right? Yeah, well, that's your mom." What? What do you mean? I don't even like her. So now she's telling me that my aunt is really my mother. So anyway, shortly after this, within a couple of weeks, a few weeks of this, they both started drinking. Now, I found out later in my life that they had stopped drinking when they adopted me. And so they made it, 6 years, I guess. And so after they started drinking, my whole life changed. These two wonderful people turned into, Pat, my mom, she was kind of a funny drunk or a pass out drunk. She wasn't mean. Bob, oh God, he was horrible. He was just a mean, nasty guy. And, he had PTSD from the war too. So he had his own baggage and stuff. Right. And so next thing I know, that there's two wonderful people who were just horrible. So they went to the grocery store one day and I went, okay, well, they're hiding it right over there. What is this stuff? What is it that's about this? They drink this and, why is my whole life changing here? And so when they went to the store, I went and got a coffee cup, man. I filled it about half full and boom, down it went. And, that was it, man. My life was forever changed right there in that moment. I never had a chance. I totally believe, Ed, that I was an alcoholic right there on the spot. And I say that because I was acting alcoholically after I did that. I wanted to drink more. And what was so profound for me is, and I'll never forget, is that it was like they poured rocket fuel in me. It was just, and, all this courage and, you know what I mean? And it took over my body and my mind. And it took me all those years to recover. So that's all happening. Remember, I'm 11 years old. So by the time I'm a junior in high school, they kicked me out of high school because I was violent. I was dangerous. And they did the right thing. They should have kicked me out. And so, after that, then things just kind of moved along. And, hard drugs came into the picture.
It was the 70s.
It was the 60s and the 70s, right?
Right. I'm just saying that's what was going. It was a totally different world back then.
Totally different world.
And on top of that, with the story you told us originally, what you were doing and how you did everything, it was amazing that that you could actually function.
Yeah, exactly. And here's the interesting thing, and people don't quite get this, but you didn't worry about dying from doing cocaine or heroin because it was pretty much pure. There was no fentanyl, right? There was none of that stuff. Now you could OD, don't get me wrong, but you didn't hear about it all that often. Because again, we were getting heroin from Bali. We were getting cocaine from South America. So again, it was rocket. It was like you said, it was sex, drugs, and rock and roll for the 70s. You had everything. LSD was really popular. All your hallucinogenics, mescaline, all that, orange sunshine, more rainbow, all these different psychedelics were there, and they were clean too. And they were coming out of San Francisco right up, on the other side of Modesto. So, yeah. And I just, if it made you feel good or it helped deal with pain, I did it. And then I did it until I couldn't do it. And that was in my third marriage. I married a childhood sweetheart in high school. Should have never married this young girl. Hell, we were married for, we were in Hawaii for 2 weeks on the honeymoon. And I think it was probably 2 weeks after we got back, we were already, in trouble. Then I married a wonderful gal, Betsy, who got me out of California, who literally saved my life, because let's just say that some of the drug dealers back in those days weren't real happy with me. And so then when I moved to the East Coast, I met a bartender. Go figure, right? How convenient was that? And then she had 3 kids. And so we decided to get married. And when I did that, I was like, you know what? This is a really good idea, because if I marry her, I'll be responsible because I really love these kids and I'll be a good dad. Well, my intention was good, but my addiction was stronger. And so it just didn't work out. And then one day on June 8th, 1988, when I woke up that morning, I said, that's it. That was D-Day for me, man. I'm done. I'm out. And of course, my first thought was where I was in my head in that moment. I really didn't think I had any other options but to take my own life. Well, we find out if we think about it, that's not true. And what got me there was, what stopped me was, you know what? If you do that, if you take your own life, guess who's going to clean that mess up? Those 3 kids upstairs are going to have to deal with that. And you're going to ruin their life. And that's when I went, you can't do that, man. That's wrong. You got to suck it up, pal, and figure out another way. And so that's when I reached out to Alcoholics Anonymous, made the phone call, and got a wonderful lady on the phone who helped me immensely. And she made a phone call and had a guy come pick me up and took me to my first meeting. I went to 4 meetings my first day, literally. I went to a 12:30, 4:30, 6:30, and an 8:30. And then that was literally another moment in my life that completely changed and altered the course of my life. because for the first time I could remember, I felt home in AA. I loved it. I was in an all men's group, and these guys were freaking incredible human beings. And they knew I was in a lot of trouble. They knew I was suicidal, homicidal. And man, they latched on to me. They would come and get me and take me to meetings, and they made sure I got a sponsor, and they make sure that I was studying the steps and doing what I was told. And they took really, really good care of me. And that's where I literally fell in love with helping other human beings, because I learned if you help enough human beings get what they want in life, you'll get what you want in life.
Yep.
Right. So the preamble in AA says, when anyone anywhere reaches out, I want the hand of AA to be there. And for that, I'm responsible. And that became my creed. And I lived up to that. And one day turned into a month, and a month turned into 6, and 6 turned into a year. And as you know, I'm coming up on June 8th of this year, and it'll be 36 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you, man. Yeah. And I appreciate everybody. When I was, in Modesto at our event, and everybody clapped, and, it makes you feel good. It's kind of ironic too, though. It's like, listen, it's kind of, I almost feel guilty when people applaud for me when I tell them how much sobriety I have. And I was like, guys, understand, man, all I did was I stopped trying to kill myself. That's all I really did.
Right, but that, I mean, that's the challenge in itself right there. Look at people with PTSD and other stuff. I mean, I always say that, we have so much PTSD from as a kid. That's why we go in the military, right? That we've, some way, because I had an abusive father who, thank God, he died when I was 12 of hairy cell leukemia, because he was bad, to the point where I had my deviated septum repaired. And the guy said to him, the doctor told my wife, he must have had his nose broken when he was really young. And I remember that was in the back of the car when my dad backhanded me for dropping something. So, yeah.
Damn, dude. Yeah, I know. You shared that with me. And
it's the only way you can is to share. Right.
Right. Yeah. Well, and then, and look who you've turned into. You made a decision, man. You created a story about that, and you've done incredible things, and you continue to do that. So kudos to you for not using that horrible way that you were treated to be a shithead instead of a really great guy. You know what I mean? You made that choice. And so, kudos to you for that.
Thanks.
And so, we are the architect of our life, man. We are the ones that get to, decide, really? Okay, that was really bad that happened to you. What road do you want to go down? You want to go down the road of, having people feel sorry for you and you're the victim? Or do you want to go over here and say, hey, I can relate to you. I can, tell me more about what happened in your childhood or your alcoholism or whatever. And so you and I both made that decision. And that's really kind of what got us to Modesto and, Operation Do No Harm, because at the end of the day, we recognize that there's those categories of people that need a tremendous amount of help. Number one, kids that have been abused. Boom. You and I. Boom. Single moms. And then, of course, our vets and our first responders. And that's why, the event that we did was, and I said it on camera, I've done hundreds of firewalks all over the world, literally. And Modesto is now, without a shadow of a doubt, the number one firewalk that I've ever done, period. And it's grooming us to do a lot more. And of course, we had all the help from the Modesto Rotary, the Sunshine Rotary. You guys were incredible, speaking.
Sunrise. I don't want
Sunrise.
Yeah.
What I said?
Sunshine.
Oh, Sunshine. Oh, sorry. Sunrise.
Band. Wasn't that a band back in the 70s?
Right. Here I am. Yeah. I got the, the mural painted on the side. Yeah. So
where's my little,
yeah.
all those.
Hey,
I can't say what it's called with the little tambourine. Let me get my tambourine out.
Yeah, right. And my kazoo.
Yeah.
It was magnificent.
Partridge Family. We'll get
the Partridge Family. There he goes. That's the van I'm thinking about with the colors on the side. And,
yeah.
But man, what
one of those two.
That's after my time. I didn't do any Scooby-Doo.
Yeah. But you're right. I mean, that event to me was different. As much as I enjoyed helping veterans and other people that we helped, watching my grandson, I think we talked about it in the beginning, just the change on his face and the way he was so jazzed afterwards.
Yeah.
And then, you know, what happened with him. And so you could, and I was like, okay, I really want to focus on veterans and their families. We should still have it open to other people, but my real focus would be those people, because those are the people that I relate to because of what I went through.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. The way you were treated versus look at the way your grandson's being treated. Right. And my grandson's very similar. He's getting all the love and support of his family, and he's just surrounded with it. And I got to do that to my kids too. Right. I showered them with that. I used to sit in my son's room when he was a kid sleeping, and I would whisper in his ear and I'd tell him that he was brilliant and smart and he was wonderful. And I did it to both my kids. And so when Eli came and running up to me, and you know what it was interesting about that moment was I didn't remember that I had a mic. I was wearing a wireless mic.
Yeah.
And and in that moment, it was Eli and I mean, hugging me like that. He was hugging me so, and it was just, I could feel the love, when you can feel the love coming out of a child at that age based on what we had just done. It's beyond magnificent. And it just furthers, and you're right, I get it. It was about the vets and it was about the first responders. But man, in that moment, that moment has changed my life by far. As I look back into the 30 years I've been doing this, Ed, and even my own kids, right? When, my daughter was 6 years old when she walked, my son was 9 years old, incredible magical moments. When I walked my grandson when he was, I don't know, maybe 18 months old. When I say walked him, obviously I carried him across the fire.
No, we made him walk at the little feet.
Yeah, here you go, toddle him across.
Stop crying. Right? Stop crying.
Stop that crying. I'll smack you. I'll give you something to cry about, as our parents used to say, right?
Yeah.
But Eli, man, and it was so interesting because the more I've watched it, I was watching what was going on around us. Everybody moved out of the way, kind of a thing, if you will, so that the cameras could come in. And you know what I mean? If you look, everybody in the back, everybody was watching that moment. And again, what they didn't hear was what I was saying to him. And again, I had no idea that would come out later when Jay, the videographer from C3 Insurance, well, you know what was it? Oh, wow. You know what? This is really cool. So that night, when we all came home, Jay was sitting down at his computer and he was editing it. And he was keeping the volume down because he didn't want me to hear it. He wanted to create it without me seeing or hearing it, right? He wanted to put it all together. But there was this one moment and he had the volume high. I think he took his headphones off. He got a phone call or something. He had to take his headphones off. And so I heard it. I heard me talking to Eli and I go, what? Whoa, because I didn't realize it had been recorded. So it was like blowing my mind. I was like, what? It was actually kind of scary. It kind of scared the crap out of me. I was like, what happened? Yeah. So, that's the beauty of the whole thing. And remember when we talked about doing this originally, I don't know if it was you or Ralph said, hey, can we bring kids? Absolutely. Yeah. Give them to me. Right. Let's do it. It's one of the most life-changing experiences. And, you can tell that to somebody and they're like, yeah. But now you have it. You have him walking and then you have the recording of the hug.
Right. And it is for not everybody. It depends on where you are in life and what you're going through. And at that point, right. Because I mean, there's some people, because I did talk to some people after, it was not that life. You're freaking 65 and you've done everything you wanted to do in life. This is not challenging to you because I mean, I can get that. But for most people that, especially my daughter, when she walked, it changed her life. And we'll talk about that afterwards. And then, and so Eli, so that's why I'm like, okay, we got to focus on whoever it is and their families, because that's the most important thing. I mean, both of them are, but I want everybody included, because I think that when we originally set this up, when we said veterans and first responders, it wasn't really focused on and your family. You know what I mean?
No, you're right. No, you're absolutely right. And I have a lot of those. I've got a good buddy of mine, Adam Carricker. And Adam's was a first round draft pick out of Nebraska. Went on to play in the NFL for 8 years and has a whole backstory. He hurt his leg, hurt his knee, and his doctor said, you're not going to be able to play anymore. And Adam said, whoa, wait a minute, pal. You don't make that decision for me. I make that decision. You know what it took for me to become a first round draft pick going into the NFL? You work your tail off. It ended up being a career ending injury. But the bottom line was, when I firewalked him back in 2000, I think it was 19 or 18. And then we came back like a year later. Well, I only firewalked him and his wife, Angie. Now, if you can imagine, Adam, he's 6'9", huge. He's incredibly fast. And his wife, Angie's 5'4", and he's 6'9", right? So anyway, when we came back the following year, they've got 6 kids. And so Angie reached out to me and she said, Dave, can we bring our kids? Can we do this with our kids? And I said, absolutely. Give them to me. If you trust me, give them to me. I'll get them across that fire. And we did. And so I've had lots of that. I get that all the time because I do a lot of events for EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization. And they ask the same question. Hey, can we bring our families? Absolutely. In fact, I think I might have sent you that one video where, I don't know, I think the video we've got, 4 or 5 kids that are walking in there. But you're right, because now that family did it as a unit. And how are you going to outdo that?
Right. And you're together more.
You're together, right? You break the board, which is really exciting. And that's always cool for kids. Just that alone, just a board break alone for a kid is phenomenal. Because, the only other place they're going to be able to do that is probably a dojo somewhere in America, right? Because they use it for graduation and when they get a new belt and such. But when you can combine that with the firewalk as well, and you do that as a family, that's pretty darn profound. So I think we learned a lot in and around that we have to make this available, and maybe emphasize a little bit more on the family side of this, where we make sure that say, hey, and now that we've got both of those recordings, and so we can take that video and create another video that shows what it's like, from a family's perspective. Because, hey, can you take your kids to Disney World and have a great time? You sure can. But a few years down the road, you're not going to remember, much of it.
No. And they're going to forget this too. So they have to do it more often. So.
Well, they will and they won't. There's, the firewalk community, when I talk to them, Ed, on a regular basis, they always remember their firewalk. They remember it in detail. It's almost like, remembering where you were during 9/11 or where you were, because you're in such a peak emotional state during the process. It's recorded in a way so that your brain, remembers every little detail. And it still blows my mind. Eli, that little boy, and as he grows older, he's in my heart, because he was right there. He was, his heart was on mine in that moment. So there's always going to be that special bond that's created there. Well, again, it also does it for the family, because I have talked to some families that have done this together with me, and they talk about it. They get that. And again, it's just, you're in such a high peak emotional state that that never goes away. You'll never forget that.
But I think what you get from it, right? It's like childbirth, man. If women remember that pain, they never go through it again.
That's right.
Right. So
right.
Even though we remember it and whatever, it's not that, it's, unless there's something else that solidifies it at that point, or you're going through something at that point and it helped you get through. It's like when we walked the Camino de Santiago, my wife wanted to do it. That's the walk in Spain.
Right.
And we did it. We didn't do the whole thing because we didn't have 30 to 40 days to do it. We only did 3 weeks worth. But again, you do it to figure out what you're trying to do. And everybody has different reasons. And I totally remember that, because that was a lot of work. And the first year we got done, we said we never do it again. And we went back 2 years later on a different route. So what I'm getting at is you forget some of that stuff, but it'd be nice to have this again and again, the communities where the same people could come out again and again and,
Yeah.
be connected some more to it. So,
Yeah. Well, I'm in as far as what you guys want to do. It was a spectacular event. There were so many wonderful things that happened, and so many amazing people showed up. Obviously, again, your Rotary, you and Ralph knocked it out of the park. I got to spend that time with Ralph and and his wife and family and his daughter and and all of that as well. And then Jamie Reed and C3 Insurance and him and his and Jay, the videographer, with some really cool stuff going on with them. And then of course American Weed, those guys, hell, how many did they have? I mean, obviously
yeah,
we
probably
had Ron. Yeah, they
7,
had
I
like
think 6 to 7,
six
6
or
to
seven
7 people.
people.
Yeah.
And and again, so many of the members of the Rotary came up to me and they were just so gracious, and they were just, it's phenomenal. And so yeah,
We have a
we'll get.
huge, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, Dave. I was going to say, we have a huge buy-in from everybody. So,
Yeah. Well, and that's great, man. So we should probably start talking about the next one and
first
get it
weekend
on
in
the
May.
first weekend in May. And then that way, now we have a whole year.
Right.
And so that's a lot of time. And we've got all the video footage and we've got all the testimonials and we've got, the momentum of the inaugural. And I think, and again, however you guys want to do it works for me. If we want to continue with the idea of Operation Do No Harm, I think that's a great idea. And then again, I think the bonus factor that we all learned at the event was, oh yeah, well, look what it does for the family.
Right. I think I didn't realize how much that would, until I saw Eli.
So. I didn't either. Candidly, Ed, I didn't either. I did not see that coming. But it's, and isn't it amazing how a sweet young boy like that could, how do I say this? I mean, he's the one that took that event and said, "Oh, here, take a look at it from this angle."
Right.
Look what it can do here from a family perspective. And I've always known that, right? I have, because I've been around it. But then again, I just never put that piece together. I never put that component in there. And Eli just walked right up and showed us really what that's all about and how profoundly he was affected that night.
Yeah. And for me, I was so focused on Friday night, Saturday night that it was, and then Sunday, you're so exhausted, you're sending out stuff to thank everybody. And I was driving over to see Mark Henry, remember him and his grandson. And I was driving down there and I was holding a lighter that we had. And I read the backside of it. It said I walked at the 12th and the 13th, which is true because I actually walked both days.
Yes, you did.
Right. And I was like, I realized we actually did a lot to help people. It was surreal. It finally hit me that we actually did something amazing. And that's the most, and that's something, you realize that we're going to put something together and we did it. And then you're just like, wow, we actually did it. So,
well, I think we had this conversation early on. And I said, I'm going to warn you, this could easily turn into something, beyond spectacular and viral.
All I got to say is John Thurman Field. That is our local baseball team's field arena.
Oh, okay. I loved the venue. They were great, by the way.
Well, we're going to book the same venue, but I'm just saying I want to get enough to where we potentially would have to move it to John Thurman
to a stadium. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
And I can't.
And that's in the county also, by the way.
Wow. I wonder, I know you're probably sharing some of this with me, and that is, I wonder if it got back to it.
It's been on the radio. Of course it's gotten back to him. I talked about it all the time. The week you were on, the week after, we bring it up all the time.
And you know what? And maybe he'll get that figured out. Maybe he'll go, wow, I'm hearing all this really cool stuff from the community. Maybe next time, why don't you just come on down?
Right. That's Jeremiah who sang, right? He's a council person, and he's like, you got me 100% buy-in for next year. And he was like, can we focus more just on veterans? And and I was like, that's fine. And I think that way, but veterans and their family, and we can still have it for community members and what we did and have other people. But really, as we find in life, you have to niche down to who you want to help. That's who you're trying to help. However, it doesn't mean you can't bring other people out. You're going to get other people other than them, but that's who you focus on to get the message out.
And, the whole creed, right? The whole take an oath. Well, and it just dawned on me here, after this, is that when you do it as a family unit, then that drives it even deeper, especially with the code of honor, right? So if the vet's got their wife or their kids or whatever at the event, and they take the oath, then now, you know what I mean? It solidifies the family unit as well. So I think it strengthens the resistance to them wanting to take their own life at a much, much deeper level.
Yeah.
So,
and we really need to talk about this because I'm getting reached out to do something in Washington, D.C. area, Pennsylvania.
Okay. Yeah. Well, you probably don't want to do it in D.C.
No, I'm just saying Pennsylvania is where that whole area.
That's all.
Just find an old smelting plant and just do it there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and
they're not around anymore. They closed them all up. There's something else now.
Well, Colorado reached out. Another, it wasn't a Rotary, but it was somebody that heard me on. I don't know if it was on your podcast or another podcast.
Now, the guy reached out to me, and then I told him to reach out to you.
Yeah,
also.
Rick. I spoke to Rick. I've spoken to Rick twice. They want to do it. They have quite a substantial military community there in Colorado.
Well, that 4 bases right there. That's a little different.
Exactly. Yeah, that's. I knew there were 2. I didn't know about the other 2. So I learned that. So that's the wheels are already moving on that. And then Jamie Reed at C3. Guess what? He's got a whole. He's up to something. I don't know exactly what he's doing, but he's definitely up to something. And so he's all in. And I haven't spoken to American Weed yet because I know that as soon as the event was over, that Ryan and Jessica had to go to Florida for some big event, and then they had to go to California for something else as well. So I know they've been on the move lately. So you probably got the memo. We're going to try to do on Friday. Yeah, we'll try to do a pre meeting there. And
I already have it on the calendar now.
So. Oh, cool. Yeah. Well, we were trying to structure it, and I was like, look. Ed's got to be there. I mean, I don't want to do this where Ed can't be there. And then, Jamie needs to, there was just certain, if Waz is not there, that's that one I can live with because we'll record it and Captain Waz can listen to it. That's the other thing. I don't remember who made that. Did Jay make that video too? The one where they interview Waz, Captain Waz.
We haven't seen any video, just so you know.
Oh, the
one you sent was the only one we saw.
Yeah, well, that one in there is where they captured Captain Waz talking, and he's choked up and talking about, how many comrades he's lost in the fire department.
And I think that's a good cause for those, but it might be better if we kind of we'll talk about it off air.
Yeah, sure.
On the podcast. And Dave, thanks for coming on the podcast today on the Helping the Brave telling your story. I really appreciate you coming in today.
My pleasure, Ed. Always, man.
If you like what we're doing here, just remember, just hit that little button right there and subscribe. And again, thank you, Dave, for being here and make it a great day.